Excellencies, distinguished speakers, dear participants, warm greetings from New York. I'm Andrej Spildegovic, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Latvia to the United Nations. It's been very busy first few days of the 66th session of the UN Commission on the Status of Women. And I would like to welcome warmly and thank you everyone who has joined this event dedicated to women in environmental sciences. Before I continue with my welcoming remarks, I would like to kindly remind all participants of some housekeeping rules. By now, we all know them by heart, but as we say in Latvia, repetition is the mother of knowledge. So please keep your microphones muted and turn them on only when given the floor. As you can see from the agenda today, we have an exciting list of speakers that will be introducing to us all along, and the participants will have opportunity to ask questions after we will have heard their presentations. Please be aware that this event is open and it is live streamed on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, and will be recorded and available on these platforms after the event. Today's event is co-organized by the missions of Argentina, Germany, Republic of Korea, South Africa, and would like to extend my sincere gratitude to these missions for excellent collaboration in shaping this side event, and also to the CSW Bureau during this session. From the inception, this event was envisaged as a cross-regional sharing of experiences of women in science. I am pleased that today we will hear from distinguished scientists, not just from different regions, but also from different scientific fields. I hope that this event will add to cross-fertilization of ideas, best practices, and recommendations on how to foster the participation of women in environmental sciences, and how governments and societies at large can enhance their leadership. However, before we turn to the core substance of today's event, I must say that over the last few weeks, our many hearts and minds have been concentrated on Ukraine and the resilient fight of Ukrainian people for their dignity, for their independence and freedom. Latvia condemns in the strongest possible terms Russia's unprovoked and unjustified military aggression, supported by Belarus against Ukraine. The war Russia wages is brutal and suffering it causes is devastating. The shelling of nuclear power plant in Chernobyl, environmental impact of this tragedy will affect all international community. The bombing of maternity hospital in Mariupol has needlessly reminded that women and girls are the most vulnerable during military conflicts. Latvia is steadfast in its support to Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity. And we call on international community to stand with Ukraine and to extend the humanitarian assistance to its people that need it so much. Dear participants, besides war and conflict, the world also faces unprecedented emergencies of climate change, environmental pollution, biodiversity loss, and desertification. For years, we have heard the dire warnings, read the somber headlines of scientific reports. Now, increasingly, we also witness it in our lives. We are realizing that the question is not what can we do, but what more must be done. This event and the 66th session of CSW at large focuses on how these emergencies affect women and girls, and what societies must do to fully unleash the knowledge, skills, and leadership of women and girls to overcome these emergencies. For Latvia, that has committed to reach climate neutrality by 2050 and has been a long-standing champion on gender equality. The link between climate change and gender equality is very clear. Yet, the solutions will not arrive overnight. We believe that solutions lie in changing gender stereotypes in education, providing lifelong learning and networking opportunities, ensuring better representation and more supportive policies for work-life balance. I'm sure that many of scientists we hear from today will reflect on these critical ingredients and put forward many of them in front of us. We look forward to learning from your experiences, learning from your success and your mistakes. And I will stop now my welcoming remarks here and turn the duties as today's host and moderator. First, I would like to give the floor to Her Excellency Ambassador Antje Lendertse, permanent representative of Germany to the United Nations, who also is a vice chair of CSW Bureau. Please share your opening remarks, dear Antje. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, dear Andres, for giving me the floor. And let me maybe start out at the outset to echo your words on Ukraine and the deliberations of this year's CSW in many meetings, but also in the couloirs, in the corridors. Our thoughts are with the Ukrainian women and the Ukrainian girls that are victims of this Russian war, this Russian attack on Ukraine. But also with the thoughts are with the women in other conflicts. Sima Bahus has put it like that in her opening speech. And maybe let me add that the truth is the first casualty in war. That is an old saying by Aeschylus. And the scientists and also the women scientists are of course also alongside with us and others are fighting for the truth, because without truth there is no science, and without science there will be no truth. And it's very important to stick to the facts and also to take on board your populations, your people in the national and international context for these true facts and not the false facts. And this is particularly alarming in this conflict and this war, that we have also a war on disinformation. With this opening words, thinking about Ukraine, I would like to continue on what also Andres, the Latvian ambassador, said. We are here also in this commission on the status of women with a very, very important subject. It deals with the empowerment of women and girls in the context of climate change. So it is very important also that the word of academia is on our agenda. The word of academia is still, as you know, an arena in which women have to overcome many barriers in order to be equally involved and included, and it's very much like in diplomacy. Germany is no exception to that, and I want to be a bit autocritical now. To start off, in 2019, the famous journal Nature published an article about Germany falling behind when it comes to the diversity in science. Only 35% of academic staff at research facilities were women, and only 16% of grant applications submitted to the German Research Funding Society, the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, come from women. Even if women's representation among PhD students is still quite strong, figures drop when we look at the leadership positions, such as those with tenure track or professorships. The reasons are manifold and structural. They have to do with the lack of care options for working mothers, unsustainable working conditions with short-term contracts and high expectations to work around the clock, historical patterns of filling positions based on personal relations rather than on merits, and a publishing system in which male-dominated editor boards make publishing decisions based on who works at which university. Or, as the journal Nature put it, hurdles can range from a lack of childcare facilities to straight-up sexism and discrimination. As we all know, women scientists must be equally involved and receive equal opportunities in publishing space if we want to have a chance at tackling the most pressing issues of our times: the climate crisis, disaster risk prevention, emerging infectious diseases, for example. The German government has been trying to counteract this for quite some time now, for example, by funding specific programs and awards for women scientists. I hope that these initiatives will bear fruit. I'm therefore very grateful to an impressive group of women scientists who will present today, and among them is Dr. Frauke Mücksch, a virologist from Germany focusing on emerging infectious diseases, who has been one of the leading COVID researchers recently. And I learned that she has over 60 publications and over 6,000 citations, and she was the 2021 Bulgari Women and Science Fellow in COVID-19 research, and will talk about her experience both in the US and in the German system. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, when Dr. Jill Biden kept her well-deserved title in front of her name after receiving much backlash for doing so as the First Lady of the United States, women scientists all over the world put their title on their Twitter account in solidarity. It was a demonstration of strength, but also a showcase of the discriminatory reflexes that still work in our societies. Women in academia have been fighting for getting their well-deserved spots, and I'm delighted that we can learn from their experiences today. And thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, dear Ambassador, dear Antje, for your candid remarks and for Germany's vision and leadership on gender equality, addressing climate change and environmental challenges. I want to wish you as well every success with facilitating of the agreed conclusions of CSW session. Turning to the next speaker on our agenda, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Thelma Krug, Vice Chair of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Dr. Krug was elected as Vice Chair of the IPCC for the 6th cycle of panel, after having been co-chair of the IPCC Task Force on National Greenhouse Gas Inventories. She is a former researcher at the Earth Observation Coordination at the National Institute for Space Research in Brazil, and for many years also represented Brazil in climate negotiations. Dr. Krug, we are honored to have you with us, and please share your wealth of experience with us. Thank you. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Her Excellency, Ambassador Piedegovics, and also Her Excellency, Ambassador Lindetze. I'm very sorry for my pronunciation. Good afternoon to both of you, and please allow me, through you, to welcome all the authorities, speakers, and participants to this meeting. So I will start by first thanking the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women for organizing this side event about women in environmental science. I feel very honored to make these opening remarks for this important event, and I am sure that the distinguished speakers that will follow me will enrich the discussions, bringing their own vision and experiences. In my presentation, I decided to highlight the importance the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, assigns to the participation of women in its work. The IPCC is a panel of 195 member governments that has been established in 1988, thus completing its 34th birthday this year. I have been participating, as Ambassador Piedegovics has mentioned in his introduction, I've been participating in the IPCC since 2002, when I was elected co-chair of the Task Force on National Greenhouse Gas Inventories for the fourth assessment cycle, the AR4 of the IPCC, was re-elected for the same position in 2009 for the fifth assessment cycle, and finally, in 2015, elected as vice chair of the IPCC for the sixth cycle that we are now. So for the first time in 27 years, since the establishment of the IPCC, a woman occupied such a position in the Bureau. But another woman, Co Barrett from the United States, was also elected as vice chair at the same session in 2015, so breaking a long-time male dominance for higher positions in the IPCC Bureau. So although gender considerations have been in the agenda of the IPCC for a long time, including in processes and procedures of the panel, such as, for instance, seeking gender balance in the selection of authors, coordinating lead authors, and review editors. In addition, of course, to ensuring the range of scientific, technical, and socioeconomic backgrounds needed, as well as the geographical balance that assures a balanced participation of developing and developed countries. So in this assessment cycle that started in 2015, however, enhanced attention has been given to gender issues, including through the establishment of specific task forces on gender. The first one was created in March 2018 to develop a framework of goals and actions to improve gender balance and address gender-related issues within the IPCC. The results and recommendations from this task group stimulated the panel to establish a second task force in May 2019 that was charged with the responsibility to develop a draft gender policy and gender implementation plan, which was presented and approved by the panel in February 2020. So the policy and implementation plan establishes goals and implementation actions that lead the IPCC towards achieving its vision of a future state where gender is mainstreamed into its processes in an inclusive and respectful manner, where there is gender balance in participation and all have equal opportunities irrespective of gender. So in so doing, the IPCC will raise awareness of the benefits of gender equality. So while the focus of this policy is on gender, it is also important to recognize that gender often intersects with other factors that influence participation, including race, ethnicity, language, disability, age, diversity of expertise, and nationality. But looking at how gender balance has evolved through time in the last 3 cycles, each comprising of about 6 years, which I will refer, as I already did, to AR4, AR5, and AR6, the cycle we are now. So some progress is really evident. From 15% participation of women as coordinating lead authors in AR4 and AR5, this participation more than doubled in this AR6 cycle. So went from 15% to almost 30%. A similar increase was experienced with the percentage of women selected as lead authors, which grew from 16% in AR4 to 22% in AR5, and in this cycle to 33%. It is also important to acknowledge that there was not only an overall percent increase of women as authors, but that this increase occurred in all 3 working groups that contribute to the IPCC assessment reports. For instance, from AR5 to AR6, an increase from 18 to 27% of women participating in working group 1, which focus on physical basis of climate change. For working group 2, which deals with impacts, adaptation, and vulnerability, this increase was even higher, from 27 to 40%. And finally, in the working group 3 that addresses mitigation of climate change, the participation of women increased from 19% to 31%. So we can see a systematic increase of women's participation, not only as authors, but also in the IPCC Bureau as members, which jumped from 28% to 44% from the previous assessment cycle to this one. And also the number of women participating as delegates in the IPCC plenary sessions. And I might say that they are not participating, their voice is very active. Some of them are really taking their scientific voice into the approval sessions of the IPCC. So as IPCC seeks to achieve gender balance in all aspects of its work, it is conscious of the many barriers to overcome to ensure that not only the balance improves, but also that equal opportunities to speak and be heard is achieved. So in this cycle, for the first time, training by experts in the field of inclusive practices collaboration, and participatory group dynamics was introduced. And in addition, IPCC carried out a survey, an anonymous survey, to seek feedback from participants through a questionnaire that included experiences at the meetings, the ability to fully participate, the perception of a bias or discrimination during the write-up process, and identification of factors affecting the own participation of the author. So these are just some examples of the issues addressed in the survey, which provided such an important feedback that it stimulated another survey to be carried out by professionals to ensure that for the next assessment cycle that starts next year, we improve inclusiveness for women and also respecting the intrinsic cultural and ethnic differences. So sorry for not bringing too much of my own participation on how did I get to the IPCC and staying there now as a dinosaur for so many years, almost 20 years with the IPCC, and looking and seeing these improvements, systematically increasing. As I mentioned, it's not only the participation, it's not only the number, it is how women are really embedded in all processes, respected as such, have the same voice, the same equal opportunity for all places in the IPCC. So with that, I hope to have brought at least some good hope that women are increasing in their participation. In the survey, to finalize, we didn't see a reaction by women feeling discriminated in the process. Obviously, there are exceptions, but in general, I think the IPCC welcomes very much this gender balance, and in particular because it looks for this diversity as a very positive element into the discussion. So diversity for us is not only gender, it's race, it's age, it's experience. So it's a whole range of elements that make the IPCC this authoritative scientific voice in the climate change issues. So with that, I thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'm really looking forward for the next presentations that I'm sure are going to bring many more experiences into the table. Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Thank you so much, Dr. Krug, for your meaningful statement, for your leadership of IPCC, and also for your very encouraging observations. Now we will turn to our panelists, women from the science communities in Argentina, Germany, Latvia, Republic of Korea, and South Africa. Our panelists have agreed to share their experiences in pursuing careers in science and addressing the pressing challenges related to climate change and environment. We also look forward to hear some advice how to foster participation and leadership of women and girls in science, research, and innovation. I would like first to invite our panelist, Professor Carolina Vera from the University of Buenos Aires, CONICET in Argentina, to give her presentation. Professor, the floor is yours. Please.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to participate in this event. I would like to start sharing my personal experience as woman in climate science. Since I was a child, I was very curious about everything, particularly about weather and climate phenomena. But combined with the keen interest on physics and mathematics, pursuing studies on atmospheric sciences emerged as an obvious path for me. I had the opportunity to do my undergraduate and graduate studies at the University of Buenos Aires of Argentina, which is public and free. For more than 30 years, I have been researching on the physical basis associated with climate variability and change. And during the last 5 years, I have made progress in interdisciplinary research with the social sciences and transdisciplinary research with actors in society to generate information related to climate and climate change that is useful to underpin the activity of sectors such as family agriculture. In my career, I work as full professor at the University of Buenos Aires, but I also serve as department director, vice dean of the School of Science. Currently, I am vice chair of Working Group 1 of IPCC, and recently I had the opportunity to serve as 2 years as chief of staff of the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation of Argentina. I can say that when I was a student at university, I didn't perceive or experiment specific gender-related challenges. However, I have been subject to many challenges in my career as a woman scientist. One of them was related with the difficulties to balance family and work. In our work as a scientific researcher and academic university staff member, there is no difference between men and women. We both work with the same manner and schedules. However, when I got married and started having children, my life became very complicated for many years. In that moment, it was important for me to have a good network of women colleagues with whom we help each other, as well as the support of many members of my family, like my mother, particularly during work trips. Another challenge that I can mention is that on many occasions, I was granted less respect or authority than my male colleagues just because I was a woman. I personally reacted to that hardworking and speaking up. In all cases, I would say that seeing other women in high-profile positions helped me feel a stronger sense of belonging to scientific work. So it is important for young scientists to observe women as mentors, speakers, and leaders in their field. I would like to share some statistics from Argentina. From the positive side, I would say that 59% of the people who do research in my country are women. 51% of publishing researchers are women. However, from the negative sides, I could say that 1 in 10 women who do research do so in engineering and technology. Only 14% of the authorities of scientific organizations are women. 49% of research and development projects are led by women, which is good, but women receive 33% less funding. So from my career, I could add that an essential aspect is that research institutions should allow woman-friendly management policies, flexible work timings, fair evaluations, and mentorships, as these actions contribute to reduce the work-related stress and improve work-life balance among women scientists. Also, research institutions must be clear and explicit about their intolerance of sexual harassment and provide safe workspace. But in turn, as head of some of those research institutions, I could say that the institution requires support and general context to develop these policies aimed at gender equality. In that sense, I can comment that since December 2018, achieving gender equality is a state policy in Argentina and has been institutionalized with the creation of the Ministry of Women, Gender, and Diversities. Serving since that day at the Ministry of Science, I had the opportunity to collaborate with the creation in 2020 of the National Program for Gender Equality of our ministry. And through that program, we aim to promote the gender equality in scientific and technological institutions so that they constitute as an environment beneficial to performance and work progress. We also promote the incorporation of the gender perspective in research, development, and innovation processes from their own design. And we try to promote equality for women and diversity in accessing to hierarchical positions in research practice and in the management of science and technology institutions. As an examples of the actions that we carry out within the framework of this program, I can highlight that we promote the development of diverse and inclusive work environments in our institutions of science, we generate recommendations, guidelines, good practices, capacitation for the development of diverse and inclusive work environments. Through this program, we also provide technical assistance for the inclusion of gender perspective in scientific, technological, and innovation policy instruments, as well as in evaluation systems and award systems. And finally, we try to coordinate the actions with the Minister of Women, Gender, and Diversity of Argentina to integrate our efforts and policies in the scientific system within the National Plan for Equality in Diversity and the National Plan against Gender Violence. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Vera, for your presentation, for sharing your personal story and also perspective from Argentina. Now I would like to give the floor to the next presentation by Dr. Frauke Mörksch from the Rockefeller University in New York. Dr. Mörksch represents today also experience and perspective from Germany. Dr. Mörksch, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And it's an honor to speak here today. So thank you very much for the invitation. I'm originally from Germany. I studied biology there. As the previous speaker, was always interested in science. I knew I wanted to do something with biology or with medicine. So I started studying biology, and later on I realized I really want to do research. So I did a master's in biomedical science, where I worked for the first time with infectious diseases, and that's basically when I set the goal for my future career. I wanted to stay in infectious diseases. So I pursued a PhD in virology in the University of Heidelberg, also in Germany, where I worked on HIV. And then I moved to the US. I moved to the Rockefeller University a couple of years ago. I continued working on HIV, but then also the COVID pandemic happened. So as a virologist, of course, we stepped up. I've since then contributed to research in the field of immune responses to SARS-CoV-2 infection and also to vaccination. I met a huge number of amazing female scientists that I'm still working on with in this research. And I think virology is a field in science that still has an even bit bigger gender gap than other STEM fields. And this is not only on the senior levels, but that's actually also on the trainee level still. And even when they are very successful female virologists who are experts in their fields, they are often not the ones that are being represented in the media. And I think the COVID pandemic was a really good example for that, when I realized a lot of the people who were interviewed, they were men. So it's usually men who are representing my field in the public, and I don't think that this makes much sense if we want to increase visibility, of women in virology, to also encourage girls to go into the same field, to go into STEM careers. We need more visibility there. And I think there's a lot of non-conscious and also cultural gender bias, or let's say gender stereotypes. And I believe we have to change these perceptions and these stereotypes towards women in STEM, and to kind of encourage the young women to go beyond these standardized role models. So at some point we see a more diverse panel of scientists in leading positions, and at some point hopefully we also then see all of them represented in the media. And we don't only have to attract them, I think we also have to retain them. And I think that's more like on the stage where I am now, and I see that the system does not often make that very easy. I was personally fortunate enough to always have mentors that treated me the same as all of my male colleagues. I've never been treated differently because I'm a woman. I also had mentors that were very supportive of my career, also of my independent career, but I think that this is not a given. And I think you can also experience gender biases in different ways. And I'm sure that every woman in science has done that. I think for me personally, the first situation that I remember where I really thought like, oh yeah, there is a difference here, So when I was sitting at the table in one of the institutes that I worked at, and we talked with a friend about our career goals, we both knew that at some point we want to be independent group leaders. We want to have our own research group. And there were some research assistants also in the room, and one of them simply interrupted us and was like, "Don't you want to have kids?" We're like, "Yeah, we maybe want to have kids." And she said like that she believes that what we are doing right now might actually be a waste of our time, because if we want to have kids, we probably won't be able to compete in science, and why we actually still try. And I think this is wrong. It's definitely wrong, but I think there might be some truth behind that statement, in the sense of that this really reflects what kind of stereotypes there are, and it shows that people are aware of like structural difficulties. I think it is still quite difficult to get tenure, meaning to get permanent positions as a scientist. And it can be especially hard on women and on families, because it can mean that you have to move maybe 2-3 times before really settling down. And this is only if you're lucky enough to get a professorship. Personally, don't have kids, but I have seen women in science who were extremely smart, very talented, but who decided against pursuing a career in academia because they felt it would maybe not be as compatible as they would have wished with their families. I know it's generally, or we all know, it's kind of expected to take on more responsibility when it comes to family care. And I think that girls and women are not less capable than boys and men, but without any institutional interventions to encourage their studies and to support their informal responsibilities for care work, the gender gap in those fields will probably still persist. I know that there's a lot that's going on to help at these points. There's a lot of positive movement to change this direction. We are still not where we are. I don't think it is impossible at all to have a family and to have a successful career. I just wish it would be a bit easier. As we've already heard, despite Germany being among the world's most developed countries, there are still less than 30% of the scientists who are female. And for example, in the US, where I'm right now, this number is a bit higher with like almost 50%. I see that there are still struggles here. There are still struggles with childcare, for example. But I think that maybe the gender roles or like the view on gender roles are a bit more traditional in Germany still. But that could also be because here in the US at the Rockefeller University, I'm moving very much in a bubble. So basically all my social contacts, everyone I'm meeting every day is also a scientist. So I think there is maybe less judgment for women that don't fit into the classical gender roles than I've experienced sometimes in Germany from people that are not part of the scientific community. The German Research Foundation actually now requires that, for example, collaborative research centers promote gender equality, and they actually assign a budget for this. And I think this is something that I really enjoyed in Germany, that is a great movement. When I was there, for example, female scientists could apply for research assistants in the time that they were in maternity leave. And also they could get budgets for equipment to work from home. There was also, for example, movements like having a nanny service during seminars so that parents could attend seminars that are maybe during times where childcare is not available. And I think those measures are actually considered when there is a grant proposal that's being re-evaluated for continued funding. And I think there's also some incentives to get tenure track positions earlier. Right now at the Max Planck Society has a model where young group leaders can be tenured after leading a research group for 5 years and having a positive evaluation at the end. And I think that this is where I wish we would be going, to basically have also more job security, which is not only important for women, of course, but I think that these things sometimes hit women or hit parents a bit harder than other people. There's also, of course, a lot of positive movement on the state level, and there are incentives to change the structural barriers that prevent women from becoming leaders in the STEM field. I think that we notice that something has to change, and I think that it's also become very apparent that in the end, academia and science also pays a high price by losing women that were trained and that could give back into the system, and if they would foster a supportive environment for them. So I want to end on a positive note. I think we're moving in the right direction. I personally always wish it would be faster, but yes, that's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Murch, for your meaningful presentation, for your observations, and for your recommendations to challenge the status quo. And now it's my pleasure to welcome our next speaker, my fellow Latvian, Dr. Brigita Dalecka, who is one of the young, bright scientists dealing with scientific research on water. Dr. Dalecka is currently a researcher at the Water Research and Environmental Biotechnology Laboratory of the Riga Technical University. Please, Dr. Dalecka, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm super excited and honored that I have this opportunity today to join this event and be a part of this panel discussion. And I have prepared some slides, some presentation. And I would like to start my story today by Beatles. And in 1967, Beatles released the song, "All You Need Is Love." But today in my presentation, I would like to rephrase a little bit. All you need is water. Because I want to focus on this, my presentation, sharing my experience from water science, so far what I have done, and where are we going here in Latvia. As a young researcher, I really often hear a question and receive also the question why water still is an issue in nowadays. And basically, if you look in data, water covers more than 70% of our planet. So it looks like there's no problem. It's quite a lot. I think everybody will agree with that. But the problem is that water is not always located in accessible places, that not everybody can get this water. And also what is most important, not always this water is safe for drinking and reach the standards where consumers could consume this drinking water. I have to say also from Latvia point of view, we are quite lucky because we have quite a lot of fresh water sources here in Latvia, and we are in top leading countries regarding this. But of course, it doesn't mean that there's no problems. And if you look in data from United Nations, the data sharply highlight the problems, what is related with the water. For example, 2 billion people, what is 26% inhabitants in the world, to have a lack of safely drinking water, and almost half of population of people have a lack of safely managing sanitation. So there's a huge gap, and there's a lot of problems which should be solved today, tomorrow, and also in the future. And then I asked myself, what can I do? And almost 10 years ago, I started my studies under water science. And 6 years ago, I think I accepted one of my biggest challenge in my life. I accepted offer to start PhD project. And what is special in my PhD project that I decided with my supervisors that I will do my PhD project in 2 universities at the same time, in Riga Technical University and in KTH, Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden, in Stockholm. And then step by step, we decided that my topic will be about wastewater treatment from pharmaceutical substances using filamentous fungi. So quite challenging. I will not go today in detail in my observing data and knowledge, but I would like to share today my experience from my point of view, what kind of benefits I get, and maybe encourage some other young ladies who are listening now to also maybe take that kind of challenge in your life. So first, of course, I get new knowledge and experience. Here in this slide, some nice pictures from my study. So basically my PhD project was consisted of two parts. One was part in lab scale, where I was just doing flask experiments. And then in second stage, I moved in a pilot stage where I designed bioreactor for the fungi to treat the wastewater from pharmaceutical substances. So new knowledge, new experience, how to do this in two universities at the same time. The second thing, what is really important in PhD, of course, is the publishing and networking. And I really enjoyed that process. It was tough. Of course, now it looks, when I look back, quite smooth, but it's not true. It's really challenging, but this is something what I still using in my career. So PhD is the right place where to observe that kind of knowledge. Third one is that as I was doing my PhD project in two countries at the same time, I observed new culture and environment. And I really enjoy that because I have never lived so long time apart from Latvia. And it was something new. And I studied quite a lot of about their culture, about their traditions. And also I study in PhD project, how to spread my project ideas and also make awareness for the society what I was doing. And then in this slide you see two pictures. Quite often I accepted also offers to participate in some TV shows or answer to some TV moderators' questions what I am doing in my PhD project. This was also quite new experience for me as well. So this is something what I also study and I will take for my future career as well. As a young researcher, also, I'm receiving quite often a question, is there life after PhD project? And I have to say that there is a life after PhD project. And here you see nice pictures from my PhD defense. I did it online because of the COVID restriction. It was online, but I remember that with a really nice memories. And of course, as a double degree student, two graduation ceremonies, two different ones, but also again, great experience. And what I'm doing currently, I'm a senior researcher in water research and environmental biotechnology laboratory. Currently, I'm focusing on investigating wastewater, COVID, and how to monitoring and predicting possible outspread of this infection. So that's my current study. I'm also part of RTU Science Innovation Center, and there I'm a part of EIT Raw Materials Baltic Hub as a project manager. So I'm helping to put together startups, industry, and academic field in raw materials sector and spreading these kind of ideas. And also I'm working with the students under Student Innovation Grant Program called Vertically Integrated Project, where I'm guiding and coordinating together RTU professors and students for developing new ideas and new innovations in research. So there is life after PhD, and I really encourage all young women who are listening, do the PhD. It's worth, really. But of course, if we speak about the science and main challenges in Latvia regarding women, then I want to currently present some data from Eurostat about what proportion of women scientists and engineers here in Latvia. We are a good example, I have to say, in Europe. The latest data show that there's approximately 50% women who are engaged in science and engineering here in Latvia. So that is good. I think you will agree. So there's really nice gender balance. But I would like to highlight a little bit something else here. In numbers, it looks nice, but if you look in data from 2020, the number of women who have doctoral degree are quite low. And women till 39-year-old, there's only in Latvia 603 women who have PhD degree. And what I want to say that today that we have to definitely increase this number here in Latvia, and we have to think smartly how make new generation in Latvia for the science, and especially, of course, also for water science. Because if you look in the average age of workers in Latvia who works in water sector, then it's reaching 50 years. So really soon we will facing this really huge problem that in water sector we will need new employees because they're just getting old, and we need new generation in this. So if you are listening from Latvia, if you are young and you are good in biology, chemistry, physics, I really strongly encourage you consider to take your career in water sector. There's a place for you, definitely. And some things what I could say about what to do, what to improve, what to promote. So first, I would start by improving scientific and academic environment here in Latvia. Then, of course, we need to think about equipment, what we have, because equipment facilities changing really quickly in science. So it needs to be all the time improving. So also important part is salary and rewards, what we can provide for young researchers. There's still a gap. There still is a place for improvement. So this also could be done. I really believe that if we want to make new generation in science, in engineering, in water sector, we start to do that in really early stages. Encourage young women, and not only women, but also men, to consider take a part of this. So education system also should be improved, that we starting this. And I always, if I get some offer from the schools, from high schools to come and say, share my experience, I always say yes, because I know how it's important to inspire young women and men in science. Of course, we have to think about professional prestige in science and encourage everybody to consider to take a part of this. And of course, it's really important what we also heard from previous speakers, equality, gender balance, and opportunities, that everybody have equal rights. And I would like to finalize my presentation with a quote from John Kennedy: "Anyone who can solve the problems of water will be worthy of 2 Nobel Prizes, one for peace and one for science." So I wish the best, and we have to start now developing, improving water sector. And in the bottom of this slide is my contact information. So if you heard something relevant, where you see some cooperation or etc., you're welcome always to contact me. So that's all from my side.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dalecka, for your very inspiring presentation and for your leadership on clean water. Now I would like to invite everyone to travel virtually to the Republic of Korea and to meet Professor Moon Young Choi from the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. Professor Moon, we deeply appreciate that you have joined us regardless of the time difference. And we are looking forward to listen to your story about engagement of more women in science, technology, and innovation. Please, Dr. Moon.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency Andres Pidegovic, and also Your Excellency and Anjali Dece, and also distinguished audience and ladies and gentlemen. It is honored to be a part of this wonderful CSW side event. And I would like to share some stories about myself. And one of the reasons that I share my stories, I like the phrase, the personal is political. So I started my career as an undergraduate science major in biochemistry. And then, throughout the career process, I changed my the direction to the more social policies. So I'm doing technology policy research right now. And about 13 years ago, I interned at the UN. So I was in New York City, and I was one of the person who prepared the CSW. And after 13 years, I now be a part of this side event. So I'm so honored to be a part of this one. And about the environment of science and engineering, I'm at KAIST. It's a very engineering school. So, when people think about the science, we often, imagine lab, like this, there are experiments, etc. But we usually generally say that there are two different type of labs. The first one is a wet lab, and the second one is dry lab. So what does it mean? It means that dry lab is more about the computer science or computational mathematics. So as a social scientist, I more about doing more research in using the dry lab method. So we use computers, and we don't experiment. But about the wet lab, you need to be in the bench science, and you needed to be there, and also it's very much about the group activity. So environment is very important because science is not just out there something objective, it's the product of a culture. And also work environment is very important too. And I guess many of you probably know this one. It's about the theory, the leaking pipeline. So when you started the large volume of water, every step there's a leaking. And there's a critic in the US, there are some analysis that about the ratio of women's ratio are very consistent across the career trajectories. But that's not true in Korea yet. So every step, they're leaking. When we started undergraduate, there are more number of women, but after master's and PhD and postdoctoral fellowship, at the end, the professorship and also more high-ranked positions in around the society. So when you think about this process, we needed to find the solutions to solve the social problems. And today's the session is more about the stories and experiences. So I would like to share some good practices at KAIST where I work at. And one of the practices is that our leadership, the president and vice president, often visit the girls' middle school and women's high school, and explain why KAIST is good place for you. So that motivate the young women to get interested in STEM field, and also get to be interested in KAIST. And another program that our university started is research supported during maternity leave. That means that, as I mentioned, that often, especially about the wet lab, it's very hard to keep up the experiment, 24 hours and 7 days. Sometimes you have to grow cells and you have to, run the experiment. So it's very important to have some support during the maternity leave. So our university provide a special research grant to women scientists and engineers who is going to leave the maternity leave, so they can hire postdoctoral fellow or find other staff that can cover during the period. And also, as probably the speakers mentioned that it's also very important to work in life balance and for sustainability. And so our university has a high quality daycare center also in many universities and around the Korea. And that really helped the engineers, scientists, not just for women, for both parents, really continue to their career. And I feel gender is important too, but I think fundamentally we have to embrace diversity. So, I'm a founding member of a diversity committee at KAIST, and man-dominant society is very hard to, aware why diversity is important and how we can practice diversity. So I think having a diversity committee would really help for the organization. And the last but not the least practice is role models. And when we imagine our future, we tended to find role models and what would be like 10 years later after this career choice. So it is very important to encourage women to lead the, the organization or so groups. And the final statement that I'd like to say that this article is from Nature about 3 years ago, and it explained, why in gender analysis is improve the science and engineering. We all want to do better job about what we are doing, about science and engineering or social science and diplomacy and international relationship, any field. But gender analysis is the starting point because we have to be aware, what's the mechanism and also how we can, find the gaps. So I would like to say that gender innovation is the foundation for sustainability and betterment of the society. So we want to achieve the SDG, but for that, we need the gender innovation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Professor Moon-Young Choi, for your presentation, for your strong commitment to CSW, and also for sharing Korea's perspective on this very important subject. And again, our deep appreciation to you for sacrificing your sleep today and for joining us.
Thank you.
Now I would like to give the floor to our last presenter, Dr. Deborah Roberts. We very much look forward to Dr. Roberts' presentation as co-chair of IPCC Working Group 2, which currently Dr. Roberts is chairing as head of the Sustainable and Resilient City Initiatives Unit at eThekwini Municipality in Durban, South Africa. Dr. Roberts, we are very happy that you have joined us. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so very much, Ambassador, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon, not only to my fellow panelists, but everyone who's with us on this webinar. Let me start off with thanks to the governments of Latvia, Germany, South Africa, Argentina, and the Republic of Korea for organizing this event and providing us with this important opportunity to contribute to this important discussion and to share our personal stories with you. In many ways, I think I'm a little different to my fellow panelists. I certainly started off my career as a research scientist with a background in chemistry and biology, and that seems to be quite a common theme amongst us today. But I've spent the last 3 decades of my life working as a local government practitioner, dealing with various biodiversity, climate change, resilience, and sustainability issues in the city of Durban in South Africa. My local government experience and scientific background have led to a variety of related national and international responsibilities, such as being a United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change negotiator for South Africa for several years in the areas of adaptation and loss and damage, and being an advisor to various international local government networks and bodies such as ICLEI and UCLG. Certainly as a practitioner, my goal has always been to use science to inform planning and decision-making, in my case, at the local level. But throughout the last 3 decades, I've also maintained my links with my academic roots by working to document and assess our local government work in the fields of biodiversity, climate change adaptation, and resilience, and recording the outcome of these assessments in the peer-reviewed literature, and I must say predominantly using my own free time to do so. I've also been involved in various research projects and research partnerships linked to our local government work. And because I have remained active in the world of science and research while acting as a practitioner, I'm an honorary professor at our local university, the University of KwaZulu-Natal in Durban, and was selected as a lead author in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change during the 6th assessment cycle. So I haven't been around as long as Thelma. I'm still a relative newbie. In 2015, I was nominated and subsequently elected as co-chair of Working Group 2 of the IPCC in the 6th assessment cycle. And Working Group 2 is the group that looks at impacts, adaptation, and vulnerability to climate change. And for me, I think my election was an important moment for the IPCC because it's the first time that a local government practitioner admittedly with a scientific background, has held a leadership role in the IPCC. I'm also one of the only 3 female co-chairs in the 34 history of the IPCC that Thelma spoke about. And the co-chair roles are particularly important because they drive the technical work of each assessment cycle. And there have only been 3 women in that position over 34 years. And certainly, as a result of working very deeply within the science policy interface for so long, I believe I belong to a group that's often very overlooked and is a minority group in the sciences, the so-called pracademics. And pracademic is a term that's been used to describe someone who's both an academic, but also an active practitioner in their area. And this is an area of science and scientific research that I think doesn't get enough attention. And certainly, interestingly, in this journey I've taken between the worlds of science and practice, my experience has been that being a practitioner is in fact much more of a barrier to advancing in the scientific world than my gender has ever been. And that's not to say I've not experienced many of the challenges that my colleagues on this panel and women have traditionally encountered in the sciences. Certainly a bias in terms of women undertaking fieldwork intensive research. I can remember for my PhD, there was a sort of gentle horror in the department that I was going to spend 3 years in the field. Sadly, harassment has been part of that experience as well. The need to work harder than male colleagues to be heard and recognized, and dealing with the challenges created by juggling very extensive family care responsibilities. And in my case, that was looking after elderly parents. And unfortunately, looking after the elderly isn't as easily taken care of as providing a daycare center for children. It's a growing area of responsibility that's quite difficult to plan for. And to contend with all of these while dealing with growing professional responsibilities. And while these challenges are not insignificant, and the women on this panel have spoken to them extremely eloquently, certainly for me, the far bigger challenge, in my view, has been that by taking on this much more fluid scientific identity I have as being both a producer and user of scientific knowledge, it's been very difficult to be accepted by the more traditional scientific research community, and therefore much, much harder to contribute to the scientific discourse without an enormous amount of hard work and sheer guts and persistence, simply staying in the room when people don't want you to be there. Also, employees of practitioners are not sympathetic to the need for science. They do not often see the value of having employees writing for peer-reviewed journals or attending scientific conferences. And there's also, in my experience, no formal or structured training for scientists wanting to play this bridging role between the worlds of science and policy, which means that in many cases, the practitioners of the world end up training ourselves through our own lived experience and practice. A point I think most have touched on is funding is an issue, and certainly early in my scientific career, I was aware that I was interested not just in science, but in science that could be used in the real world. And in my case, that was the use of biology and ecology to inform the conservation of biodiversity in fragmented urban landscapes. However, funding for such very applied research in such a very applied environment was very difficult to secure from traditional funding sources. And so I learned early on that I would have to be innovative and work outside of the formal research funding streams to secure support for my research. And in my case, initially, that was from local government and from the private sector. I also realized very early on in my career that tertiary institutions find it extremely difficult to make room for the deeply applied research undertaken by people like myself, the pracademics of the world. And this remains true to this day, given what I'm told by colleagues who still remain in academia. As this type of applied research requires much longer engagement with stakeholders and has to happen at a speed dictated by local and political processes, which often gets in the way of the publish or perish race that currently plagues academia. It's also often difficult to get research on local case studies published, as the pressure is always there to have findings of global significance. And in my opinion, there's a need to acknowledge that there are many different forms of scientific knowledge, and that local practical knowledge is not less valuable than global academic knowledge. So, given that we literally live in a world desperately seeking solutions at all scales. I think it's really important that we acknowledge that the sciences need a multiplicity of change agents, all the way from research scientists doing blue sky research to academics like myself, focused on extracting the science from practice. And so how do we improve the situation to foster the kind of diversity we need in science, to provide a place not only for all genders, but also all scientific persuasions to participate in the integration of science and practice? And some things to consider in this regard based on my experience, and I think some of these points have been echoed by my fellow panelists: creating different reward packages for those involved in applied research at academic institutions, not just the usual publish or perish approach. Creating different career paths and more supportive environments for those in practice who provide the linkages to the world of science. Certainly creating dedicated funding streams for the deeply applied research undertaken by practitioners. As I say, funding for practitioners working in science is extraordinarily difficult to come by. Making room for more local research to be profiled in the peer-reviewed literature. Making a place for the academics in scientific academies. That would really shake up the kind of discussion that's happening in the scientific world. Creating bridges between scientific researchers and academics through structured research partnerships, and creating mentoring programs for early career academics and scientists to interact with one another. And so I suppose at the end of the day, the best advice I can give anyone is, once you know the path that is right for you, and our colleague from Latvia spoke very passionately about that. She's got a clear conviction about her path. Be you scientist or academic, be brave, be determined, and don't be deterred. Stubbornly pursue the change that will allow you to become the most effective scientist you can be that in a university or in a city hall. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for the platform, and I hand the mic back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roberts, for your powerful statement, for sharing generously your personal insights. And now we have concluded the presentations by our distinguished panelists. I think this hour has been very inspiring, enlightening, and educating, and it really has been a tour de force. We would like now to open the floor for questions and comments from the audience. And if you have questions, please use the raise hand button function or write your name in the chat box, and we will give you the floor accordingly. When taking the floor, please don't forget to unmute your microphone, and we will also appreciate if you would turn on your camera so we can see you, and please be so kind also to introduce yourself. You can also write your questions in the chat. While we are still waiting from questions from the audience, I would like to mention maybe a couple of themes which could be addressed by the panelists. The first question is, what else can be done to boost students, especially young girls' interest in science and environmental issues within educational systems? The second question, what is the importance of the gender-sensitive perspective and gender mainstreaming in decision-making regarding environmental policies? How policy and science influence each other in this regard? And many speakers have mentioned role models. Maybe you could share who has been your role model and what were the values that have influenced you when you had chosen your career path. I try to see whether we have specific questions. Am I right that Joanna Moore would like to take the floor? If I may read.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you, and I really liked the part where the scientists gave advice to the young girls and women students, and I work with those young girls and women, so I wrote it all down, and I will bring back your words to lots of girls in Connecticut.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Moore. We are still waiting for some other reactions or questions. Would anyone from the panel would like to reflect on on those questions, on those themes, or on any of the points raised during this exchange? We have 15 minutes left, so please use this chance to speak. I see one hand raised by Kate. Please.
Yeah, hi. So I'm a student, I'm in high school right now, and I aspire to go into science like all of you guys. So you all have been such great role models, and it's been lovely hearing you speak. I wanted to ask, since to some extent you all mentioned how hard it is to get funding for research, what advice you would have for achieving that goal?
Thank you, Kate. Great question. Would anyone from the panelists would like to comment on any of the themes raised? Please, Professor Vera.
Yes, I would like to answer what Kate has asked. As I said in my intervention, I think that we have to work hard in the funding institutions, because as Kate makes the question, it seems that women, young women, have to make extra effort to fit in a call of proposals that maybe do not have a gender perspective. And so we need to ask the institutions to incorporate gender perspective in all the aspects of not only the call of proposal for funding, but evaluation, promotion, etc. And I would like to also say to Kate that something that is very important are the network of young students, early career scientists. Nowadays, I don't think that there is another type of discrimination, not only gender discrimination, but also I would say age discrimination, because you have to be old to be heard. So we need to change that. All voices should mean the same and quite valuable in the sustainability efforts.
Thank you so much, Professor Vera. Dr. Roberts, please, floor is yours.
Carolina, we're not old, we're just wise.
Okay, Asian,
exactly.
Like the wines.
We're well matured. But going to Kate's question, you know, the point I was trying to make is that science is evolving. It's like human society, it's adapting to a multitude of societal needs. And so science is no longer happening only in wet labs or dry labs or universities, because of the challenges we face. We all require evidence-based decision-making. And so science is happening in the most unusual places. And so Carolina spoke to the formal funding system. But for those of us who are the renegades, who work on the periphery of science and link it to policy, we've got to get a lot more creative. And my experience is, you're selling a story. You're going to be doing work that's relevant. You've got to find the sector to whom it's important. And you've got to be able to sell them a story of why getting behind you and supporting that work is of value to them. And so, you know, one of the best skills I've honed is my storytelling capacity, the ability to tell a story around the science I'm doing that anchors it in the priorities of that institution, of that community, of that society. And I think that's really important. You know, that's the one thing we were never taught when we were trained as scientists. You know, somehow the scientist was going to be locked away and not engaged with the world. No one ever told us that we would have to be these brilliant communicators, conveying difficult concepts into the world in compelling and ways that made sense to a variety of people. So certainly seeking funding from the non-traditional sources requires you to be quite a skilled storyteller, to be able to get people behind you and supporting the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roberts. Professor Choi, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you for the wonderful question, Kate. And I would like to say that the important factors for successful funding is excellence in research and also information and networking. So you needed to get to know the, what kind of fundings are available. And also, as the Dr. Roberts mentioned, that the communication skills, good writing and speech. And also, I think the most important thing is, consistency. So it's challenging, but it's very important not to give up. And also, there are many different sources of fundings. And I feel the new generation, the millennials and, the next alpha generation might have different, research environment. So crowdfunding is another way of get funding for civil, science and also the new research. So good luck with your, career. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Choi. Now I would like to ask whether Dr. Krug, Dr. Murksh, or Dr. Dalecka would like to reflect on any of the subjects. Please, Dr. Dalecka.
Yeah, I can really quick give a simple advice. I don't know if, Kate, you are already a student or if you are from Europe. I really encourage you to search for some kind of mobility or scholarships which are provided by Erasmus+. It's really easy way how to get a funding and travel a little bit abroad and gain new experience, also including in the science.
Thank you, Dr. Dalecka. Dr. Krug or
Yes,
Dr. Murksh? Yes, please.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm gonna take two issues. The first one, my role model, 70 years, I'm 71 now. So it's my mother with absolutely no formal education. She was wise enough to let me know first that we should have respect for ourselves to have the respect of others. You don't impose respect. You only gain that by respecting yourself. So that's the first one. She was, someone that had such an educational ambition for their children, not looking for what they would become afterwards, but she wanted us to study, because she said only with that we would be different from, her own life, because she didn't have too much, of an education background, so she couldn't go too much into a professional life. But so I think that this made an enormous amount of a difference in my mind. So there is not a single day that I do not remember her words and motivate me to really, go beyond potentially my limits. The second point that I make that I don't think that anyone made, but because I am asked so much to give advice to the young women that are pursuing their careers, is please do not let maternity be a barrier for you to achieve your professional dreams, let's say. Sometimes we think in the IPCC, where are the barriers? And because, authors have to devote themselves for a cycle, so we are talking about 5-6 years. Some might feel like, well, what happens if I, have a child? How do I can attend the meetings, go far away? And I would say we have examples in the IPCC of women that are scientists from the birth, I would say, that have 5-6 children. They come to the meetings, with the babies. They never let that be an impediment for them to become an excellent scientist, to participate. So my advice is, please choose your partner, whoever he or she is, so that this partner is a real partner that, understand your dreams and pursues those dreams with you from beginning to end. So that is my advice to everyone. Be careful to whom you choose, because that might help or make it more difficult for you to get your dreams done. So I hope this is helpful, Ambassador.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Krug. Dr. Murch, would you like to say something very briefly, 1 minute?
Yes, actually to the same point. So for me, my role model was, my first role model, probably my parents, both of them, who were always extremely supportive. And I know I'm very privileged in that they let me choose whatever I want to do. And were always standing behind me and didn't have any gender stereotypes, I think. And then I had a great biology teacher that I think was the person who got me into the direction of biology. I'm still in contact with her and she's always been very inspirational for me. And so the advice for young girls, I know I mentioned a lot of like challenges, but I would do it again over and over. I would, science is one of the best parts of my life. I love doing science and I can just really encourage every girl, despite the challenges, to do it. And they'll manage. There are just more challenges maybe than for men, but it's extremely rewarding. So yeah, that will be it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Murch. I think I saw one hand raised by, I don't know, he or she with the name Kim. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I've loved this conversation. I am not in the sciences at all. I plugged in to learn more. It was interesting to hear from all around countries and continents around the world. What I also heard, though, was that for women, like in every field, they need to, as you had said, tell their story. They need to learn how to sell and market themselves, which again, my background, in order to get funding, in order to get the what they need to also, again, tell the story and sell about their research. And I'm wondering if in universities, I know that they are literally making other, let's say the sciences, take courses in marketing or whatever to learn those other facets that they didn't realize were going to be a part of their job. I didn't know if that was something, and I know we're over time, but I just wanted to share. I didn't know if that was something that was going on.
Would anyone like to reflect very, very briefly in 30 seconds, 40 seconds on this point? Anyone from the expert community volunteering?
Okay, I can make a comment.
Yes, please,
Yeah,
Professor Vera.
Yeah,
yes, 1 minute max.
Yeah, at least in Argentina, we don't have courses for marketing to sell, but it is true that in our school, we have some communication, as Deborah says and others, at least we think that each scientist and student should dedicate at least 20% of their time in interacting with our communities. That dialogue that Deborah mentioned is quite important to reinforce.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Vera. Dear panelists, dear participants, I think it's been a quite extraordinary hour and a half. And as it is cited in the concept note, according to UNESCO Science Report 2021, women account for 4 out of 10 academic worldwide, but often they face an impenetrable glass ceiling. I think today we have heard that this glass ceiling can be penetrated and it must be done, and we can all do our part in doing that. For the sake of us all, I would like to thank all panelists for their very rich contribution. And I think your presentations have been really inspiring all of us to address the issues of the climate and the multiple environmental emergencies in an inclusive and sustainable way. And I would like to also say in my personal capacity as a father of the master's student in public health, I really am proud that one of my daughters is pursuing this path of doing science now at the university, but certainly she will strive for PhD, as Dr. Delecka has suggested us. This ESW 66 session has just started. This is just a beginning. So I very much hope that you will follow it, and I hope it will be inspirational, particularly now as COVID-19 is receding. And I want to thank again all our speakers, all presenters for their really important messages, and to thank everyone who joined us and watched us online. The recording of this event will be available after this event. And now I would like to conclude our event and to wish all of you productive day, good rest, and all luck in all your future plans. Thank you so much.
Thank you.